Airlines Confidential with Scott McCartney is made possible with support from Pratt & Whitney, committed to working smarter, cleaner, and greener today for a more sustainable tomorrow. PrattWhitney.com. Infinity Flight, the leader in Cadet Academy flight training programs. InfinityFlight.com. Ontario International Airport in Southern California. SoCal So Easy. And by Cirium, the world's most trusted source of aviation analytics, Cirium.com. We also welcome your business's support. Contact us at airlinesconfidential.com.
Welcome to Airlines Confidential. I'm Scott McCartney, and I'm fixing to unload. I'm mad and I'm frustrated, and I think there is a simple solution we're going to propose to pay air traffic controllers during this government shutdown. I'm joined this week by the eminent airline analyst and marketer Henry Harteveldt, who is bringing you a very important guest at the forefront of airline retailing and artificial intelligence in the airline industry. So talk about important episodes. This one, I think, is going to be pretty darn powerful. Seatbelts on, Henry. Here we go.
Well, it's good to be back, Scott. Thanks. Later, we are going to be talking with Alex Manns, the founder and CEO of FLYR. FLYR, spelled FLYR, is an AI company that is at the forefront of the massive changes taking place in airline retailing. AI has the potential to reduce cost, increase revenue, and vastly modernize and improve the customer experience. But as we saw with Delta a few months ago, when they talked about using AI to help price tickets, the use of AI in airline retailing is not without risk. So this should be a very, very timely and very informative discussion.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to talking to Alex and really looking forward to trying to understand what AI means for the airline industry. And I think he's going to be able to explain that very well in ways that I think will be helpful to all of us. So, Henry, before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to mark the 1-year anniversary of the passing of Ben Baldanza, the co-founder of this podcast. Ben, the longtime aviation leader and winner of the Wright Brothers Memorial Trophy, had so much impact on airlines. In Judaism, we call this anniversary a Yahrzeit. I think it's a lovely practice. We light a 24-hour candle to remember someone who has passed away, whose memory is still close to us. So there's a candle for Ben burning on my kitchen counter. We miss him so much. We send our best wishes to his wife, Marcia, and son, Enzo, and all of his family and his legions of friends. As longtime listeners recall, Ben was a great student, not only of airline strategy, but also of consumer behavior. Ben had Spirit making a lot of money by offering bare bones service with the opportunity to pay more to get more, a la carte. You want more room, you pay for it. You want to bring more bags, you pay more for that. You want a soda or a snack, you pay for it in Ben's airline world. That strategy is today driving the entire airline industry. Delta and airlines on down profit enormously from selling its premium products rather than giving them away, as was done in the past to frequent flyers. The theory Ben brought to U.S. airlines drives the industry today. In a sense, every airline today is a student of Ben Baldanza. And what I really miss, what I really, really, really miss is the chance to talk to him about it and to talk to him about how Spirit lost its advantage. Because, we would all learn from what he'd have to say.
Scott, I share your sense of loss around Ben. He left a big void in this industry and in our world. I didn't work too closely with Ben, but we would often have some very interesting conversations about Spirit. And one thing I really respected about Ben and what Spirit did is the utter transparency and frankness in how they went to market.
Yeah,
I took issue with some of the advertising. I felt sometimes it was sophomoric, sometimes it crossed the line of good taste. And as a marketing person, that's what I would also sometimes talk with him about. But he would turn around and say, Henry, here are the results of it. And you can't quibble with that. And one thing, though, that I really respected, again, about how Ben and his colleagues at Spirit ran the airline is they made no apologies for what they were. And Spirit really helped show other US airlines the way to democratize air travel. They made it financially affordable for a lot more people to travel, just as decades ago, People Express did so in the late 1970s and early 80s in the US. Freddie Laker, before him with Laker Skytrain, and others in the interim, Ryanair, EasyJet, Air Asia, and so on. But I really, really, really wish that Ben were here to get his take on how he views what's happening and what has happened recently with Spirit. I have to tell you, I think that Ben is spinning in his grave as he watches what's going on and looks at this and like it was so I had this thing running well when I was there, and look at the mess it is now. And I just have to say, I sure hope that Spirit is able to find a way to successfully navigate its way through the second bankruptcy reorganization, that they start to see business return. It's not just the airline, it's the people who work there, it's the jobs and the impact on the communities that Spirit serves.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of news this week. It seems like the biggest news has been coming from Washington, D.C., a town full of finger pointing over the government shutdown. This past week, we saw the four largest airlines in the U.S., American, Delta, Southwest, and United, sign on to a push to get Congress to pass a continuing resolution to fund the government with a promise to try to resolve the health insurance subsidy issues that has created the stalemate. That's the Republican position. It is perhaps no surprise that airlines signed on to that position. The Republicans are in charge in this administration, and there are many other areas where big airlines want to be on the good side of the party in charge. This may also reflect the new head of Airlines for America, the airline's U.S. trade group, Chris Sununu, who is now the leader of the airline lobby group in Washington. Mr. Sununu is a Republican politician, after all. And then it went a giant step farther when airline CEOs went to the White House for a photo opportunity with Vice President J.D. Vance and Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. The politicians painted the Democrats as the reason why travelers are experiencing air traffic control related delays, and controllers are not getting paid right now. Scott Kirby from United and Robert Isom from American showed up for that. Mr. Sununu was there as well. Delta's Ed Bastian was not there, nor was Bob Jordan from Southwest Airlines. It was reported that the CEOs of the Big Four were there, or at least supported the statement that was issued, but only two of the four were at the White House with the VP last Thursday. I have to tell you, we have all been through these shutdowns before. I have concerns about how politicians of both parties use private sector executives sometimes to make their statements. Again, I realize this is a game that the leaders, not just in airlines, but other industries that may have interest before the government, have to play. I don't envy anybody who finds themselves at any time being asked to participate in these types of events. And I'm sure there is some very, very heated, thoughtful, and complex conversations taking place between the CEOs, the airline's government affairs folks, their other communications advisors, and perhaps anyone else who may be involved. It's a very, very tough situation. I would just like to add this one thing, because we were talking about the shutdown and delays. Granted, this is an example of one, so it's completely statistically meaningless. But last night I returned home from a 2-week trip. I was in New York. I returned to San Francisco. I was on American, an airline, by the way, that we have taken to task for delays in the past. We departed on the dot at 5 p.m. We arrived more than 30 minutes early. We had, by the way, an absolutely gorgeous sunset at Kennedy Airport last night. And, I know that the air traffic controllers are doing their best to keep airlines and aircraft and the people on them moving smoothly, safely, and on time. I know the TSA people are doing their level best to show up. And I don't envy the situation those folks find themselves in. They now getting $0 paychecks. It is tough for anybody right now to make a living and make ends meet. And my respect goes out to all of the professionals on the government side who are doing their very best to keep the industry functioning. And with Thanksgiving just 3 or so weeks away, I sure hope that there is a resolution that is arrived at. I'm very, very, very concerned about what could happen to Thanksgiving travel if we don't see a resolution to this shutdown fairly quickly. Scott, what do you think?
I absolutely agree, Henry. First off, thanks and so much respect for the air traffic controllers who are showing up for work, and in some cases, they were already like working all kinds of overtime or two positions consolidated into one, and all kinds of stress. And this just adds to it. To be working a month without pay is just more than we should ever ask of them. But eternal thanks that they are doing it, and TSA screeners as well. I think that's the first thing. And I just have so many thoughts about this. I have to say, and I don't like to venture into politics on the podcast, but these CEOs did, and I was upset about that. I think Kirby and Isom looked like they were being played for pawns in a political fight. Their appearance only deepened the split between Democrats and Republicans on the shutdown. Personally, I would have advised them to go only if Democrats were at the table, right? This is ostensibly a roundtable discussion on what was happening. Well, if it's a roundtable discussion, there should have been Democrats at the table too. And if that's not going to happen, then I think they should have left the White House and immediately gone to a meeting with Democratic leaders. So you don't look like you're picking sides, but they did pick a side. So instead, it's just more of the finger pointing and name calling that we've seen in Washington. And it's unfortunate that travel is getting caught in the middle of this. I should know we're recording this on Monday. So who knows? There could be a sudden resolution, but I certainly share your concern about Thanksgiving. And I think we all know, and everybody has been saying this is likely to get worse before it gets better. I will say, as you said, it's hard to say no to the White House under any administration, right? They're the people in charge. Scott Kirby and United have supported Trump before. I think there was a big donation to his inaugural, for example. But political beliefs aside, airlines often need things from the White House, whether it's approval for mergers or joint ventures. They need things from Congress if it's bailouts from the pandemic or killing passenger rights legislation or whatever. I get it that they have to play the game in Washington. But I just thought this was a bad look. I hope it leads to a resolution or helps find a solution. In the meantime, I do think there is a solution to the air traffic controller pay issue. And frankly, I was really disappointed that the CEOs and A4A haven't thought of this or proposed this or championed this as they have become involved in this. I think it's the solution. This is a simple solution, economically sound and easy to implement. So here's my proposal. Pay controllers with money from the Airport and Airway Trust Fund. This is money that commercial airline passengers pay in ticket taxes. It is sitting there unspent. The cash balance at the end of fiscal year 2024 was more than $18 billion. and it has gone up regularly every year in recent history. Now, I did a bit of back of the napkin accounting on what it would cost to pay air traffic controllers for 1 month. There are 13,000, 14,000 of them. And if they make $200,000 a year, many make less than that. That would be a monthly payroll, roughly around $200 to $230 million or so. So another way you can look at this is at the end of fiscal year 2025. The administration's budget request was for about $7 billion in salaries and expenses for the FAA's air traffic organization, where air traffic controllers reside. There's a whole lot more in the air traffic organization than just air traffic controllers, but funding the entire air traffic organization for salaries and benefits would require about $583 million a month. So bottom line, $18 billion is plenty enough to cover this for many months, really. Now, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy was on the Sunday morning TV shows this week, and he was asked about paying air traffic controllers, and he said the administration had tried to find a way, but it didn't have the money. And the question was sort of in the context of, hey, the administration found money to pay for troops, and there's money to pay the salaries of people in Congress. They're still getting paid, and certainly the White House. So why not air traffic controllers? Secretary Duffy said he'd love to pay air traffic controllers, but the Department of Transportation just didn't have the money. That's not the case. The tax money that's collected off of tickets is sitting there, $18 billion worth. It is dedicated to running the operations of the FAA and the national airspace. This is exactly what we're talking about. This trust fund is the primary source of funding for the FAA, and it has had huge surpluses. So Congress likes that because it makes the overall budget deficit look smaller. But the bottom line is there's plenty of money there to pay air traffic controllers and then pay back the trust fund when the budget issue is resolved. You're going to pay the air traffic controllers eventually. You could pay them now and pay back the trust fund. It might take authorization from Congress to spend trust fund money that way, but that would be a very clean one-issue authorization for air traffic controllers. Both sides seem to be in support that they should be paid. So I would like to see that solution get discussed. So, Henry, you mentioned your flight from New York back to San Francisco on time. I was actually in Washington this past week, and on Friday flew from Washington Reagan to Dallas, again, right on time. We were delayed an hour the day before going in. It was interesting because I was on Southwest. Southwest said it was because of weather in the morning. It certainly was bad weather in the morning, but it was crystal clear by the time we got to Washington. It was an example of exactly the problem in the air traffic control system. It's slow to handle disruption and recover from storms. That can happen there is a shortage of controllers every day to begin with because we're 2,000, 3,000 controllers short of what full staffing would be. So the reality is, I think we all know the air traffic control staffing situation will get worse as this shutdown drags on. I think that'll probably force one side or the other to give in. But before we get to that, if Congress and the administration really cared about the stress and strain on air traffic controllers and the delays and cancellations affecting travelers, they'd pay controllers using money from the Aviation Trust Fund and pay it back after there's a budget compromise. Plain and simple, do it this week.
Scott, your idea is really interesting. Now, I'm no expert on government funding or budgeting. I don't know how it works in terms of moving all the piles of money that are part of our government around. But I do like the idea that you have brought up. I think if it were legally possible to do this, I'd like to see the administration consider your idea of using that trust fund as a funding source for the air traffic controllers, frankly, for all of the people at the FAA. And I wish there were a way, I hope there might be a way to fund the people who work at TSA and airport security, because so many of those employees live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
That they're, DHS and TSA have said that they've been seeing increases in sick rates. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're seeing an increase in the number of TSA airport security workers who are resigning from their jobs as they look for more stable employment elsewhere.
Yeah.
Again, we're talking about people doing what they can to make ends meet, putting food on the table, paying their rent or mortgages, paying for their kids, schools, healthcare, all of these very important issues we all face in the country. I will say, Scott, because you mentioned Secretary Duffy being on the Sunday morning talk shows, I am back in the office after being off for a week on vacation, a very unusual kind of vacation. I sailed across the Atlantic for the first time with a group of friends on the Queen Mary 2 from England to New York. And I got to tell you, while they had television in the rooms, we had Starlink Wi-Fi, it was kind of nice being a little bit disconnected from the real world, so to speak, for 7 days.
I bet.
And staring out at the majesty of the seas and all of that. But I will tell you, as we approached New York, our group's anxieties all increased. People were, staying on top of the news, and people were worried, would their flights to where the cities where they lived be operating? Would they be on time? Would there be delays, et cetera, et cetera? I am a data guy. I love data and the insights it provides. So what I'd like to do is contribute a sense of perspective in the forms of numbers from our good friends at Cirium. Scott, you and I serve together on Cirium's on-time performance advisory board. So we're very, very familiar with the high-quality flight tracking data that Cirium can and does provide to airlines, airports, and others. Cirium pulled data for us from the 15 busiest U.S. airports for the month of October, which basically covers the government shutdown period thus far. The on-time departure rate for flights at those airports was 80.2% on time, which is to say pushback within 14 minutes of scheduled departure time. In comparison, September, which did not have a government shutdown, came in at 81.9% on-time departure at those same 15 busiest airports. So October was a bit worse, but not terribly out of the norm. Cirium also looked at the last 2 days of the month because there had been the suggestion that things were getting worse, and they no doubt will. On Thursday, October 30th, the air system didn't run so well. Only 71% of flights departed on time. But there were real problems on the East Coast, which had storms that morning. Scott, maybe that was the day that you went to Washington, D.C.?
Yes, exactly.
So the three New York area airports were around 60% on time. Boston was worse, 55%. Washington Reagan National, only 42% on time. October 31st, Halloween was better, though. Again, better weather, better on-time performance, overall 83% on time that day. So the reality is, yes, there have been delays, but nothing, it appears to be, out of the ordinary so far. Every day, flights are delayed by air traffic control issues, which is why we need to modernize the equipment, the hardware, the software, and everything else, that the connectivity that supports our air traffic control operations, and work to fully staff all the air traffic control facilities as quickly as we can. But expecting air traffic controllers and others at the FAA, and again, the folks who work at TSA and other parts of government associated with aviation, to continue to work at the superhuman levels that they do without getting paid for long periods of time, that's just not realistic. I mean, unless you are truly independently wealthy, you need a paycheck. And I'm not too aware of people who work at government who are like that, not at least as air traffic controllers or airport security screening officers or others like that. So again, I hope that cooler heads prevail and there is some kind of resolution to this shutdown, and that these good people who are working at superhuman levels get their back pay promptly.
Right. The mortgage has to be paid. The kids' school tuition, the food has to be put on the table. None of that is getting waved away during the shutdown. It is just not fair. And I hope one of the outcomes of this is that people again realize how fragile the system is and how understaffed it is when it's fully funded. I would hope that this would drive further the urgency of we have to fix this system, because as those numbers show, it really is so inflexible in dealing with the disruptions of storms and slow to recover. We've seen staffing shortages during the shutdown. The Burbank Tower gets shut down. There's a period recently where Dallas-Fort Worth was only running operations on the east side of the airport. It shut down the west side because there weren't enough controllers. Basically the airport's operating at half of its capacity. This is a big problem. And I do think if the shutdown's not going to end right away, there is a temporary fix. If politicians want it, that they should go ahead with, because that money is there for paying air traffic controllers. I don't think this is, you're not shifting it from national parks to air traffic control. Travelers have already paid for this through ticket taxes, and that's where it needs to be used. All right. We don't have ticket taxes or trust funds to keep our operations going. We rely on the support of our sponsors. And so thanks to Pratt & Whitney. At Pratt & Whitney, the pursuit of more sustainable aviation is foundational. For decades, Pratt & Whitney has been at the forefront of revolutionary advancements in aircraft propulsion technology. And by working smarter, cleaner, and greener today, they are committed to supporting the aviation industry in its goal of reaching net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. Learn more about Pratt & Whitney's smarter technology, cleaner fuel, and greener business at prattwhitney.com. And thanks as well to Infinity Flight for its sponsorship of Airlines Confidential. As a proud partner of the American Airlines Cadet Academy, Infinity Flight delivers high-quality pilot training designed to meet the exacting standards of today's commercial airlines. Infinity Flight is building the next generation of airline pilots, focused, prepared, and ready for the flight deck. Learn more at infinityflight.com. Infinity Flight, the trusted choice of aspiring aviation professionals and the world's largest airlines.
Thanks as well to Cirium for its sponsorship. We just talked about the data, used the data that Cirium has. They offer the most accurate and precise data and analytics that enable airlines to optimize their planning, operations, and passenger services. The right intelligence drives operational efficiencies, enables airlines to predict market shifts, and helps them respond quickly to maximize revenue, manage costs, and seize commercial opportunities. For more information, please visit cirium.com. Deep thanks as well to Ontario International Airport for its support. Faster is always better when it comes to traveling in and out of Southern California. That's why a growing number of travelers are choosing Ontario International Airport. With quick freeway access, easy parking, and shorter lines, J.D. Power surveys consistently rank ONT the most popular midsize airport in California. Visit flyontario.com to learn more about ONT and how they boldly seize every opportunity to connect the Inland Empire to the world.
Okay, let's bring in Alex Manns from FLYR.
We're here today with Alex Mann, the founder and CEO of FLYR, a new generation greenfield technology company that uses contemporary technologies, including deep learning, artificial intelligence, to eliminate legacy constraints on pricing and selling tickets and services for airlines and the hospitality business. For those who follow airline distribution, you may be familiar with the industry's transition to what is known as modern airline retailing, which will be based on what will be known as offers, and orders. This is all the result of work spearheaded initially by IATA with its new distribution capabilities, or NDC schemas. FLYR was created to enable and support the industry's transition to retailing. About a year ago, FLYR signed a groundbreaking deal with startup airline Ryanair in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to become the world's first digitally native airline. FLYR will launch without any legacy reservation system technology, which is a major, major deal in the airline industry. FLYR is also working with established carriers, including Virgin Atlantic, Air New Zealand, and Avianca, as those carriers transition to modern airline retailing. It's a pleasure to have Alex joining us. And Alex, for once, you are actually at home, I understand, as opposed to being on the road. Welcome to Airlines Confidential, Alex.
Very nice to be here. Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate your invite.
Great to have you with us.
Alex, the first question that we always ask our guests is what we affectionately call the Ben Baldanza question. It's named after the co-founder of the Airlines Confidential podcast with Scott, the late Ben Baldanza. How did you get into this crazy airline business?
Yeah, so let me start at the beginning. So I grew up as a kid on the airfield, basically spending weekends in and around Cessna 172s. I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I heard Your Airplane for the first time spoken at me. So I always grew up around airplanes. I think the first word I spoke as a kid, as a baby, was the Dutch equivalent of airplane, pointing at the sky. So there's always been a fascination. To this very day, airline and vintage airline posters continue to adorn my walls in my office and at home. And then as I grew up and I finished my primary school and my high school, younger than most, I started my first company in cybersecurity. And I promise I'll go back to aviation shortly. And that company was really focused on what's called deep packet inspection. So using algorithms to recognize potential threats on your network before they reach your computer or your mobile device. And eventually, when I was about 22 and I had moved to California, about 12 years ago, I wanted to combine those two worlds. I wanted to combine my passion for aviation and my history in aviation, growing up around it, with this algorithmic intelligence, in particular deep learning. And that's how we initially founded FLYR, with a focus on predicting airfares and helping airlines price better. And then from there, eventually, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but we worked our way down to the core of the issue, and that is the legacy reservation system, which is holding airlines back. So that's kind of in summary, my journey to do what I do today and to do what FLYR does today. Although I'm still extremely passionate about aviation. Like I fly a lot. I travel about 2 to 3 weeks a month, all over the world. I still have my license to fly myself, although I don't have as much time to do so, I'm afraid. Hopefully that will come back in the future, but I'm deeply passionate about the industry. I'm passionate about technology, and being able to combine those two things means the world to me.
Alex, I love that you're a fellow pilot. I love that it started in 172s as it did for me. It's really great, and I find, and I'm sure you do too, always brings great understanding to the business when you actually fly yourself. So it's so great to have you join us. I do want to start with some basics for listeners. We hear a lot about AI and everything these days. We see it every time we do a Google search, or maybe even use it to write an email or memo, or we see it when we look at some crazy Facebook post. But big picture, what can AI do for airlines, and how? Why is this technology different? And what do you say to someone who says this is just more hype, not reality?
Yeah, so maybe let's break it down a little bit. I think there are 3 sides of the AI story when it comes to airlines, 2 of which are kind of focused on the airline as the consumer of the AI capability, one of which is the consumer itself. So maybe to start with the airline, we think of the airline as having 2 sides of its business. There's the operational business, right? The people and the infrastructure dealing with check-ins and bags and onboard service and making sure you're addressed with the appropriate loyalty status. And there, AI can have a massive impact because it helps optimize everything from turnaround times and on-time performance to making sure people are appropriately reminded of their loyalty status, or just improving the customer experience on the physical side of the experience with the airline. The second side of it is the commercial side, right? Like, how can AI help an airline optimize the experiences, the selling, the servicing that they provide? On the selling side, naturally, AI can help people make decisions. AI can help understand what it is you're interested in, right? Which seats that you pick historically, right? So let me at least suggest a window seat because you've always picked a window seat, or let me propose a flexible bundle because you are booking what seems to be a business trip, right? And the company's paying, or let me suggest economy because in your current search you seem to be looking for yourself, your spouse, and your 2 children. So AI has the ability to kind of better optimize and make it more seamless, the booking side. And on the servicing side, of course, the same thing is true where AI agents, right, these days are very capable, or becoming very capable, of actually booking, changing your bookings on their own, right? So I think we're going to see a transition from waiting in line on the phone for somebody to respond to your request to change a booking to simply interacting with an AI agent, either in text or in verbal form. So that's kind of the commercial side. And then there's the consumer side of the AI story, and that is everything from inspiration as to where you want to travel to actually do the job of comparing all the rates and destinations and product options that might be available to purchase to all the way purchasing that option. So AI is going to radically change the efficiency and personalization of the physical experience, the operation. That's the first one. AI is going to dramatically change the commercial side of the operation of the airline, and that is in the form of the selling and servicing function on the commercial side. And it's going to dramatically change the way people find and buy their products in the first place because their AI agent, whether that is ChatGPT or Anthropic or X.AI, those agents are going to be doing the comparison and the booking on our behalf. So there's massive changes coming in the interaction surface, if you will, between the customer and the airline. So those are some examples of categories of what we expect to see changing in the coming years, and we are preparing for that. Like, we don't actually provide that particular AI, but we provide the infrastructure to which that AI is speaking.
Alex, thank you for the explanation about AI. I think those of our listeners who are working at airlines are probably saying, "Well, we've been using AI in various forms for several years now." For example, I think it was back in 2017, Delta started to use elements of AI, probably large language models, to help with route forecasting, weather forecasting, and routing the aircraft, and so on. And we certainly know that it is being used across the airline enterprise in different ways. But you really highlighted some ways where I think we will see AI enter the airline business in ways that will become more tangible, if you will, to the consumer, even if they don't necessarily see it or notice it actively as they interact with an airline. I think what would be helpful for our listeners is to start with the proverbial 30,000 foot view about FLYR. So would you mind taking a moment to tell us what FLYR does in layman's terms and why it is different from other companies in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me describe what FLYR is today, ignoring the journey that got us here for a second. Maybe we'll get to talk about that later. But FLYR is fundamentally all in on modern airline retailing. And modern airline retailing basically means enabling capabilities like a shopping cart, enabling the airline to sell their own products more easily, as well as third-party products, the ability to personalize, right, or make more relevant the offers they give to their consumers, and the ability to have kind of omni-channel presence and consistency, no matter how and where you sell. At the source of all this is the problem we're trying to solve, or the problem we're trying to get rid of, and that is the legacy passenger service system. Right today, airlines are still running on fundamentally the same technologies and protocols that they have been running on for the last 30 to 40 years, and that passenger service system and the PNR in which it is storing information doesn't really understand anything other than the ticket, right, or the flight itself. Whereas every other industry, whether that is healthcare, banking, public transport, education to some extent, all these industries have modernized. Suddenly, like even your local credit union mobile app suddenly allows you to do all kinds of digital banking, right? When we interact with a Shopify-powered website or Amazon, it is incredibly easy to add things to carts or to make changes or to add something to an order. Like I just saw the other day that now Amazon offers you with one click to add a product to tomorrow's delivery if that is already scheduled. Why is it that airlines have not adopted these digital interaction patterns that we have become used to in every other industry? And that's the question really that's the core of FLYR. Like how can we help airlines be more like and behave more like every other industry that sells online or sells digitally? And to solve that problem, we had to address the core, and that is the passenger service system, the reservation system of the airline, and the way it stores information. And you mentioned it earlier, IATA has had several initiatives underway on both the distribution side through NDC, but also on the systems of record side through what they call one order. So IATA has laid the groundwork for a new storage format called one order, in which an airline can store information much better in one place, right? When it comes to the passenger, the purchase, the products on that purchase, the rights that are associated with those products as well. So FLYR adopted the one order methodology and greatly expanded on that to effectively build a new reservation system, right? A new system of record on which the airline can build a true digital business. And I gave you some examples of what that enables, but it enables things like shopping carts, third-party products, introducing new products and bundles within minutes instead of months, the ability to recommend and personalize what you sell to consumers, and the ability to do so across all channels, right? So not just your .com or your mobile app, but also AI agents that might come knocking on your door. You might have seen some news about Booking.com taking a write-off on Kayak, right? A $500 million write-off on Kayak.com because AI agents are basically doing the comparison instead of Kayak now. So that's really what we do at FLYR. And Riyadh Air, you mentioned it earlier, is a really important customer to us because they had the opportunity to build the biggest airline startup since Emirates and do so making a decision on technology, whether they wanted to go bet safe on kind of the legacy incumbents or basically use this greenfield opportunity to do it right the first time around. And they made a huge bet on FLYR as their underpinning infrastructure. And even though they have many, many planes yet to come, they have a very complicated and sophisticated business, right? Full service carrier, multiple cabin classes, a large network being built up, a very large operation being built up, very ambitious digital retailing goals. So for us, they make for the optimal showcase customer effectively to engage with. And they launched last Sunday, about a week ago. And there's a lot more to come there. But so that's a bit of FLYR, helping airlines become modern retailers by doing away with the legacy limitations you'll find in the PSS or reservation system that came before.
So tell us more about Riyadh Air. When you say they launched last Sunday, is that's for reservations, or are they actually flying? Where do things stand with the airline? And as they go, what will be FLYR's role at the airline?
Absolutely. So maybe start with the role at the airline. So we are at the heart of the airline's IT stack, right? So every order system within Riyadh Air, from planning to accounting to payments to the digital channels to distribution, the revenue management practices, all of it at the end of the day talks to us because we're the system of record and we're the core orchestration system at the heart of all of it. So we are the most comparable to a legacy passenger service system at the heart of the airline's technology stack, right? That's really what we do there. Now, as for the status of Riyadh Air, they have an incredibly ambitious plan to hit 100 destinations by 2030. I believe they have close to 200 aircraft on order. Tony Douglas last week publicly stated that they're receiving one aircraft every 3 weeks in 26. then 2 aircraft a month in 27, and 3 aircraft a month in 28, to give you a sense of the scale and the speed of this scale up. They have started flying daily between Riyadh and London Heathrow last Sunday. So daily flights, daily round trip. They're introducing Dubai next, which is also not confidential. They've announced it publicly. And they are right now only selling to the government. So government-owned companies effectively and government officials. But they are opening up to the public, right? So for anybody to book a flight between Riyadh and London or Riyadh and Dubai in the next 8-ish weeks or so. But our system is fully operating behind the scenes. We have been for a while. We're introducing a bunch of new interesting capabilities in the coming months as well. But Riyadh Air is fully operational in terms of daily flying, and it's only going to scale from here.
FLYR has come a long way in a relatively short time with Riyadh Air. I know that you announced the relationship last year, but I presume that you were working with the company before the announcement became public. But regardless, what you and Riyadh Air are doing is monumental. It is truly revolutionary, as it's greenfield. They're not basing it on legacy technology providers. I think a lot of people are going to be curious, Alex, how you and your colleagues and your clients at Riyadh Air did this. To meet the very aggressive schedule that Riyadh Air had set. Did you have to go with the equivalent of a minimal viable product, and say, okay, we're going to start here, get it going, and then as the airline grows, we will enhance it? Did it require hiring a lot of people and the budget to support all that? And a lot of people who are going to be listening work at airlines that are obviously established companies. And they are facing this challenge. I mean, I've done research on the transition to modern airline retailing. And a lot of airlines feel paralyzed about this. Not many airlines have started this. So if you could talk maybe about the timeline that you spent with Riyadh Air, but then also say, okay, if you work for an established airline, what's their kind of timeline? Because they do have to deal with 60 or more year old legacy systems, plus the complexities that they may have, whether it's code-share agreements, interline partnerships, alliance relationships, anything else and everything else under the sun.
Yeah, so let me start by saying that while Riyadh Air is a new carrier, we have had to perform every single integration with every single system you will also find at any other airline that is already flying and has a legacy that it carries, right? We've had to integrate with the departure control systems for check-in and baggage and ground handling. We've had to integrate with the payment solutions. We've had to integrate with accounting. We've had to integrate with revenue management and optimization, reporting, analytics, distribution channels, right? So the functionality of what we have provided at Riyadh Air is no different than what every airline flying today on a legacy reservation system requires as well. Naturally, there is a long tail of functionality that we will continue to introduce. But to be honest, our primary focus is actually on onboarding more partners into the ecosystem, right? Code-share interline partners, third-party products like hotels, cars, activities, eSIMs, insurance. So really integration or configuration work, and launching a bunch of new capabilities that other airlines today just don't have, right? Imagine you land in Riyadh, and with one click, you can order your Uber, who will be waiting for you by the time you get through customs, right? Those are the kind of functionalities that we are really, really focused on with Riyadh Air to roll out in the coming quarters. To go back to a point you made earlier about interline and code-share, historically, the false narrative that has been spread by the providers of these legacy reservation systems is you need such a reservation system to do code sharing and interlining and to integrate with the DCS and departure control. And that is just not true, right? There is no PSS in sight anywhere at Riyadh Air, yet we are fully integrated, and we can fully integrate with many more code share, interline, and GDS distribution partnerships perfectly fine, right? So this new world of modern retailing doesn't mean you don't support the past that came before us. So to go to the timelines, it's been a very aggressive timeline. To meet that timeline with Riyadh Air and built the core product up where it was launch ready and feature rich, it took us a lot of capital and a lot of people. Right? FLYR has raised about $500 million in capital to do what we have done. Right? We're a 700-person plus team. Well over 600 of those work in engineering and product technology. So it's been a massive, monumental lift to get to where we are, because we see a future where if we get this right, which we have at Ryanair, and we will soon with others as well, if we get this right, we will pose the only credible alternative to the 2 or 3 legacy players that came before us, which have a very strained relationship with the airline industry in the first place, right? Because they control technology, they control distribution, there's a bit of a monopolistic nature to them. So the industry is waiting for an alternative. And I think we are in the right place with the right fully featured product that is fully backward compatible with the existing legacy world out there. And that's an opportunity to us and our investors that, makes $500 million invested still look like a pretty good deal, because you're talking about very large contracts, 10-year term type deals. And, we're now at the point where the payback curve is starting to form for FLYR as a business.
So just so I understand, this would not be for a legacy airline. This FLYR wouldn't be just something, let's add it on top of our system. What would happen is you would be the new passenger service system, the new reservation system.
Yeah, over time. But to go back, and thank you for reminding me, to go back to what Henry was saying earlier, we do not have to do a big bang displacement. Many airlines today are looking for an immediate path to provide a better digital experience, to improve their servicing capability for customers, to increase their margin generation potential by introducing third-party products like hotels and Ubers and cars, which they can sell in one shopping cart instead of having to send you to booking.com or other external sellers and brands. So we enable that as well. So a legacy airline that runs on a PSS can deploy us right alongside that PSS. Okay. We will synchronize all the PNRs to our orders bidirectionally. We will synchronize all the inventory. And it allows the airline to effectively build their new digital capabilities on top of us without having to immediately rip out and replace their downstream systems, which are still hanging off the PSS. So we can give the airline an immediate path to value and then let them transition from the PSS to us at whatever pace they are comfortable with. And this is also important because that transition is complicated and expensive. And the easiest way to justify it is by creating incremental revenue and margin and a better customer experience alongside of it to actually pay for this transition thereafter. And that's exactly what we're doing with legacy carriers. We haven't yet been able to announce these, but in 2026, we will be announcing some very large legacy carriers coming on board with FLYR and starting their transition from PSS to offer order platform FLYR along the way.
Fascinating. So for decades, airlines have been talking about becoming better retailers. I mean, I'm sitting in offices of airline executives and they're talking about, we know you take ski trip every December, so we'll send you an email and about that. But they've never really become good marketers. Certainly not Amazon or Nordstrom or Target or anything else. And there are lots of reasons, and they have safety requirements, regulatory constraints, complete price transparency in this business. So what does it mean to say the airline as a retailer? And I'm curious, is that the right goal, or is that just sort of Silicon Valley thinking applied to the airline industry?
Yeah, so while I have to say I definitely think Nikola Tesla is one of my kind of role models because of his pursuit of invention and belief in imagination as a key driver. I also believe that, I think it was Stephen Covey who said, keep the main thing, right? And airlines are still operating an airplane and flying people from A to B. And 95% of people they employ are focused on managing and flying the metal, so to say. And that's not going to change, right? So I believe that modernizing and digitizing an airline is not inherently in conflict with keeping the main thing as an airline. Because digital retailing doesn't just mean sell more to the customer. It also means how can I be more intuitive and more helpful in selling the things that I already sell? How does it become more seamless? When a customer has a problem or something goes wrong, right? How do I help them? How am I there for them? Right? It's just as much that because, we talk about digital retailing and we think about selling, but the reality is we spend just as much time preventing that customer from having to call the customer support center, right? If you book an interliner codeshare itinerary, how many times do we find ourselves unable to pick the seat because we have to go to the other carrier to do that with a different record locator, right? Or how many times have we heard that you book a flight through a travel agent or like an aggregator or an OTA, and you call the airline for help, and they're like, well, I can't really help you. You have to call your travel agent, right? Like, why is that? Why is it so broken? So modern digital retailing is as much about improving the serviceability of the main thing, right? The flights, the ancillaries, as it is about making it easier and better to sell more things, right? And so both are really important to us in that process. But at the end of the day, airlines are 4 to 6% margin businesses on their core products, and that's in a pretty good year, right? On the flights. Whereas like a Booking.com is $170 billion company, right? Market cap. The world's most valuable airline, Delta Airlines, is about 36, 37 billion. Like, why is there such a discrepancy? And fundamentally, that comes down to the airline is not able to monetize and harness its brand, its loyalty program to become a utility for their customer, right? So maybe, I would put it as how can an airline, through the lens of servicing and being a utility to the customer, end up actually creating a happier customer and making more money by letting them, buy their flights and cars and Ubers through their app and through their loyalty program, where everybody wins. Better service, better margin for the airline, utility instead of commodity. That's really what digital retailing is about.
Alex, what you just shared is fascinating because you speak to modularity, the modularity of the systems, the modularity of being able for an airline being able to work with different companies, the complexity, and like the example of swans, we see them gliding serenely across the water, but there's a lot of furious paddling taking place underneath. And as we look at what retailing can do right now and what AI can do within that, and you mentioned this, improving the targeting of offers to the customer, enabling airlines to do on-the-fly targeting, refining the offers they create to the customer. There's also some risk associated with this. Again, AI is going to have enormous revolutionary impact on how all businesses do business, how all kinds of organizations function. But there is some concern right now about how airlines could use AI. 25 years ago, when I became an analyst back at Forrester, and we were looking through various technologies at the time, I said that there's a fine line between cool and creepy about how companies can use their data, et cetera. A couple of months ago on an earnings call, Delta mentioned its use of AI for pricing with a vendor that they're using. And there was huge backlash because Delta said they wanted to go with what their phrase was personalized pricing. So I'd like to get your sense of how should airlines think about using AI so that it is beneficial to the business, beneficial to the customer, but isn't going to be used in a way that might create concern or even result in regulators hauling the company to a hearing, whether it's in Washington, D.C. or another capital, because they fear that the AI-based elements are abusing the information and insights an airline may have on the customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first to put it out there, like FLYR is not actually the company that is deciding to
Right.
take action on anything. We are just providing the infrastructure on top of which or to which they speak. Just having said that, so I think it's very easy to think of AI as something that is going to take over everything. I think the reality is AI initially is going to be very focused on trying to automate the things that neither party, the airline or the seller, um, nor the consumer, the buyer, wants to deal with. Right? There's many examples of situations where the consumer is just trying to do something simple, get some information, make a simple change, pick a seat, ask for a refund. Those things can just be automated. There's no need for a human agent to be involved in that whatsoever. And we're starting to see that already pretty quickly. And I think by the end of 2026, those simple tasks are all going to be automated by AI agents. And I think consumers are going to be fine with that. Then there is the second kind of advancement beyond that, and that is how is AI going to, pretend to be a human, right? Where like you pick up the phone and you call the airline and you find yourself speaking to an AI agent, which is getting very hard to differentiate from a real human at this point, voice-wise. That's the second step of it, and it gets a bit of like uncanny in that area. And then there's a whole set of applications for AI and how the airline decides to run their business. And you gave some examples around pricing automation. You gave some examples around what to sell, risks of like price and product discrimination, right, based on what's known about the consumer. I think at the end of the day, the consumer is trying to buy the right thing at the right price, and the airline is trying to meet that consumer along the way. So we're moving to a world where the consumer will be represented by an AI agent that is negotiating on their behalf as they would themselves, and the airline is represented by an AI agent, right, which is running on top of FLYR infrastructure to basically communicate what is available at what price points and tries to meet both the consumer's need while, of course, making the airline money and doing what it wants to do. So we're moving into that direction. When it comes to pricing, for example, I believe very strongly that airlines will all start developing their own AI models or AI agents that conform to the airline's own values. Some airlines in certain geographies will be very comfortable doing very intensive personalization based on everything that is known about you, effectively discriminating as to what they sell to whom and at what price. Whereas other airlines, I think especially in Europe and the US, will be much more focused on their brand perception and put really tight guidelines or guardrails around what AI is allowed to do. So FLYR really like we're really focused on giving the airline the infrastructure on top of which to do these things and make these decisions. We are not really going to set those guardrails. That is up to them. We're also not really going to provide those models because if I'm strictly told to maximize revenue, I might have to incorporate data that an airline doesn't want to be incorporated, right? Because it is on the borders of being not moral, for example, right? So we won't get involved in that game. We just provide the infrastructure, and then the airline will decide what to do with that over time. In other words, if you are willing to feed more data into a model, it might end up making more money for the airline, but you're bordering immoral. Whereas another airline, might require a different definition of that. So anyway, so I think we're the infrastructure. It is the airline is going to own the decision around how much data to use and how to apply it.
That's fascinating. I'm really curious. Do you anticipate that the world you sort of outline about each airline making a decision on how to do this? Do you think it will be left up to the companies, or do you anticipate a world where government is going to set those guardrails?
I definitely believe that the guardrails within which a company is allowed to operate will be different between Europe, the US, Asia. I think there will be differences. So in
Yeah.
other words, it will be a combination of what is technically possible, enabled by companies like FLYR, what is legally possible, mostly constrained by either governmental policy or the airline's own risk perception, and what is actually done by the airline based on what brand they want to represent. Right? A really good example is Delta Airlines. Right, like Delta Airlines is famous for its people focus and its experience focus and its relationship focus. So Delta is going to take, in my view, right, is less likely to take brand risk and loyalty risk, right, by going out onto the edge. Whereas there are other airlines that are, pretty scrupulous around maximizing profit and revenue at the cost of, consumer satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there, and we all know, we can all come up with brands and airline brands that, will fit the description. So I think, those are going to be the constraints, right? Governmental, brand, and technology. Those are going to be the three constraints within which airlines have to decide where they want to operate, how far they want to go.
Really fascinating.
Right, but again, it was ironically Delta that ignited the fire with its comments about personalized pricing a few months ago.
Yeah.
That resulted in a lot of backpedaling by the airline and a commitment that it would not take personalized pricing to a level that would say, Alex, we're going to charge you a different price from Scott and Scott a different price from Henry for the exact same itinerary, the exact same offer, the exact same product or series of products, just based on information such as demographics or psychographics or whatever other data insights that the airline might have. And look, credit to Delta for making that statement, and several other airlines in the U.S. committed to this. And at World Aviation Festival, we heard airlines talk about that. There are lines that they know they cannot cross, and they have no intention of crossing them. And those airlines, however, were primarily based in North America and in Europe. So I think that is. It's going to be very interesting to watch how this part.
Especially this kind of goes to what I said earlier around like brand, technology, and regulatory framework, because the U.S. is quickly evolving into the least regulated when it comes to AI. Europe into the most regulated, right? Similarly, the U.S. is the most technologically ahead when it comes to AI companies, adoption, availability, compute. Yet it is the U.S. airline brands that are making pretty clear stances around, we are not going to abuse the power of AI, and we will prioritize and put first the customer relationship, the customer satisfaction, and the customer comfort with us using AI, right? Which is kind of interesting, right? And it says a lot about what I said earlier, right? Keep the main thing. Airlines are still airlines, and they rely on customers, loyal customers that are returning, that enjoy the experience, that want to use their credit card programs, right? So I think it's a very interesting diversion from what is possible. Airlines choose not to go all the way out onto the edge, even though in the United States it is more possible than anywhere else. Right? It's kind of interesting contrast, which tells you a lot about the power of brand. And I think Delta is the world's most valuable airline, the world's largest airline by many measures, and probably the most valuable airline brand, right? I think American Express pays them somewhere between $5 and $10 billion a year for their co-branded credit card.
Yes. Yeah, very fascinating. So airlines being airlines, that means this is a low margin business. And what we're talking about involves short-term costs and organizational disruption, and change is hard at these companies. How do you convince airline CEOs that they should do this when the payoff may be years away?
Well, this goes back to what I said earlier, right? I think the perception has always been that when you transition from one PSS to another, right, from Sabre to Amadeus, Amadeus to Sabre, whatever that may be, right, you're talking about a very expensive 2 or 3 year program before value can be derived, because you're displacing like-for-like capability with a different vendor. In our case, we are able to unlock a lot of this value, whether that is something as simple as a shopping cart, whether that is better self-servicing, whether that is better omni-channel distribution control, overall lower cost. We're able to introduce that in parallel to what they've got today. And at the end of the day, the way you convince an airline CEO or CCO of our value is by giving them something they want in a very short time frame. Time to value, right? That's really what matters. So we've got airlines come to us that say, hey, like Ryanair, we're part of an ecosystem where we're trying to build tourism as an economy, or part of our economy in Saudi Arabia. We want to make sure that we don't just sell somebody a seat on a flight, but we actually have the ability to transact a hotel, a car transfer, an eSIM, insurance, whatever that may be. So there, the shopping cart functionality, right, is really relevant. There are other airlines that come to us and say, hey, we want to improve the self-servicing capability of our mobile apps. A great way to do that is through this new one order system of record, right, from IATA that we have built on top of, as well. So like we can be better self-servicing. Another example is airlines that are airline groups that have multiple brands within their portfolio, well, multiple airlines in their holding company, and they want to create a unified digital experience between them. Because the different airlines are on different PSSs. We're a great way to kind of unify, right, or abstract those PSSs. So at the end of the day, it comes down to like, what is the thing that the airline CEO or CCO wants to solve for? And if that is a commercial constraint, commercial technology constraint, usually we are able to help them with that without having to transition away from the PSS they have today and do it pretty quickly. And that's the primary path in when it comes to the engagements that we have going with various airlines today.
But the revenue, I mean, this is airlines are businesses, right? And they look at the revenue gain. McKinsey published a study a few years ago. They said that if done well, and retailing could generate roughly $7 more, in extra revenue per passenger. Maybe, and that may have been revised since.
Of their own products, right? That number was
of their own products, right? Of their own products, and I'm just right, yeah. And airlines are going to take different views on whether or not they want to sell third party, but just looking at their own products, it could be $7 or more in additional revenue, which doesn't sound like a lot on its own, but again, given the scale and scope of airlines today,
yeah, even $7 a passenger for most airlines means a more than 50% improvement of earnings.
Right.
So that's really the argument you make to the CEOs, I guess. And look, this is again something we heard in the research with the airlines we did earlier this year, that the CEOs struggle to understand what retailing is about. But when you tell them it can help us improve revenue, improve customer preference, improve our ability to distinguish ourselves from key competitors, et cetera, that's when they start to say, oh, okay, this sounds interesting.
And we can get really practical with them, right? Like an airline CEO might say, hey, I want to better engage my customers and our loyalty program, right? And I can give you simple examples. Like we can give them a shopping cart where consumers can just throw stuff in the cart and it persists across the channels and devices they work with. They can even invite friends, colleagues, family members to the same shopping cart, right? Suddenly you have engagement and kind of virality effectively of your products with other people. You have the ability to extract intent from that. So you can actually say, hey, maybe I'm going to offer you 2 extra points if you buy this thing in the next 24 hours. That's an example. Another example is on the self-servicing side. Consumers, especially Generation Z, they want to do more themselves on the mobile app. And they will choose an airline, especially on busy routes, they will choose an airline that allows them to self-service easily over an airline where they have to go and wait in line to call a call center. So it depends a little bit on the airline who they want to be when they grow up, so to say. And we can help them with those different objectives. Some airlines might say, I want to introduce an AI agent to represent my customer support. And to do that, you need to have a better system of record, right? Because an AI agent is only going to be as good at interacting with the airline as the connectivity and the control it has over that airline's reservation system. And we're a great way to do that. So it's really based on concrete examples, whether that is I want to make more money by selling other things, I want to improve customer satisfaction by being better at self-service, I want to reduce my costs by offloading more of my customer support onto AI agents, whether that is I want to be able to unify the digital infrastructure across my different airline brands. There's many, many examples where we can insert ourselves right alongside the existing infrastructure and solve those problems for those airline CEOs and CCOs. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Value and time to value.
Alex, I want to thank you very, very much on behalf of both Scott and myself for joining us today, especially given the very busy schedule you guys have with getting Ryanair launched. Congratulations on the success that you and your colleagues have had. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully we will have the opportunity to chat more on Airlines Confidential in the future.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Scott. Have a very nice day.
Thank you, Alex. So long. And we will be right back with more on Airlines Confidential.
Promotional support provided by the ultimate AvGeek website, thearchive.net. A vast collection of airline memorabilia, timetables, route maps, rare cabin and airport photos, special flights, and more. All at thearchive.net, the hub of air transport history.
In the mailbag this week, one correction from our friend and airline consultant, Adam Thompson. Charles Duncan mentioned that Ryanair was a single entity as opposed to the conglomerates in the rest of Europe. This is not exactly the case. Ryanair Group consists of Ryanair, Malta Air, Buzz, and Lauda Europe. Always a great show, just thought this correction needed to be made. So thank you for that, Adam. And Chris from Marin County, California offered this. Hi, Scott. I enjoyed your show a couple of weeks ago that touched on the socioeconomics of air travel. I sometimes interject the topic to myself during your podcast when the discussion seems to head that direction. Our industry is so affected by socioeconomics these days, and I don't think it should be left out of the discussion. Airlines are giving passengers a very low expectation product for ever-increasing dollars, or they offer a high-end product for a high dollar amount that reliably attracts those with disposable incomes. I hope you bring in the topic more often in future podcasts. I enjoy your show. I'm a Southwest Airlines flight attendant, and I enjoy seeing what passengers are attracted to, especially while my airline is transitioning into a legacy airline business model. So thank you for that, Chris. Henry, I'm curious on your thoughts since you study traveler data so much. Is the growing income gap affecting the industry and one of the reasons that the discount business has struggled more? Though those with disposable income do travel, and so if lower income people are struggling with inflation and employment weakness, healthcare costs, et cetera, is that affecting the airline business?
Absolutely. Scott, it was very interesting. A couple of weeks ago, CBS News reported that a financial services company did a study. 70% of Americans in this study, or nearly 70%, maybe it was 69%, said that they are struggling to make ends meet. And that is up from approximately 50% in the same study in 2023. So when you've got 7 in 10 people saying that they are struggling to make ends meet, and that tells you a lot. Another data point that I found fascinating came from the Fed, and that was published a few months ago. Approximately 50% of U.S. credit card spending is made by people in the top 10% of income earners. Think about that. Yeah. 10% of consumers account for nearly half the credit card spending in this country. And credit card spending is the primary form of payment used, by the way, for people in the US to buy airline tickets. So we are very much seeing this split, if you will. There is a world of two Americas within the United States. You've got people who are very well compensated or have a lot of wealth who are spending that money on, whether it's on airline tickets or travel more broadly, or luxury goods or automobiles, whatever it may be. And you've got a huge number of people who are struggling to make ends meet, who are having to make very, very tough decisions. Do I pay the rent, or do I forego medical care? Do I cut back on eating? Do I cut back on my grocery shopping to make ends meet? How are they navigating this? And you can draw a line from that to the challenges that the budget airlines face. Yeah. The average income from our research for the 3 largest airlines, American, Delta, and United collectively, and this is based on our first quarter 2025 study of more than 5,000 U.S. airline passengers, is around $165,000. Think about that, around $165,000. That's average. Yeah. And there are plenty who are at the $250,000 plus level. And these are the folks who are not only flying, but a lot of them are choosing to trade up. Maybe it's for extra legroom seats, premium economy, business or first class or whatever. But the average income of a budget airline customer is less than $80,000 a year. So less than half the income of those flying the big three. And Southwest, by the way, when we look at Southwest data, their average household income is slightly lower, but it's around 140,000 a year. But you're looking at people who, and again, I read just general business news, you are hearing people who do earn $100,000 or more a year saying that they are struggling to make ends meet because of the higher cost of groceries, higher mortgage or rent prices, higher interest rates on affecting the payments they have to make for cars or other loans that they may have, et cetera, et cetera. And it's definitely having an impact on our industry. People who are earning less money are foregoing vacations altogether, or they are driving. They are traveling closer to home. They are, just simply unable to spend what they might want to spend on a vacation. And that is a big challenge for the budget airlines. So I see this, there's no easy solution here, but I think that as far as the airlines go, what I wonder is when, if ever, are we going to see this correct, right? In the past, airlines were started with lower costs and they always had low fares to grow the market. Is this something that's going to be more permanent? Are we back almost in a way to when air travel was in the regulated era prior to 1978, where only the top 10 or so percent of Americans find themselves able to fly? If so, that's something that's going to require a lot of thought, because all of a sudden that means it's a much, much smaller pool of people that airlines have to compete for. And that affects everything from the routes they fly to the fleets they operate to air cabin configurations, obviously the size of the market, the amount of money they'll make, the profits, employment, and more.
Yeah, huge headwinds for the discount sector, and fascinating. You have one end of the economy that is obviously taking fewer flights, and the other end, but with plenty of disposable income, taking more flights, right? And so your customer base shrinks, even though you may be selling a lot of tickets.
Right, and look, the large, you've got a lot of airlines that are outside the budget sector that offer basic economy fares and use those, very, very effectively to compete with the budget airlines.
Yeah.
United has been one of the most vocal in talking about how successful they've been in applying the use of basic economy pricing without displacing higher yielding passengers. So certainly there are a lot of challenges that the budget sector faces. But I disagree, by the way, with Scott Kirby, who is certainly a very, very smart executive, when he says the budget model is dead. It is not. It's just that the people who like to buy, or who can afford, I should say, to buy those fares simply are not able to travel as much, but they do have more options on where they fly and how they fly.
Yeah, and this all may be a driver of consolidation in that sector of the business. Henry, great data, fascinating discussion. Thank you for bringing that to us. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the discussion with Alex and everything in this episode. It's been a delight.
Well, thank you.
That's all for another edition of Airlines Confidential. I'll be back next week with co-host Maya Liebman and a special interview with Alex Cruz, the former CEO of British Airways and Vueling Airlines, who has some unique perspectives on discount airlines as well as full-service airlines. So looking forward to that. Have a great week, everyone.
Thanks, Scott. So long, everyone.
This podcast is produced by Mass Media. Info@massmedia.net.